Word nerds, let's talk interior formatting. It is Thursday, October 24th, which means it is a circulation desk, and I'm talking about publishing. I self-published my book, Ignite, and there was so much that went into it besides what you would think. Of course, I wrote it, I revised it, I sent it to an editor, I worked on cover design, I worked with marketing, social media, but there's an aspect of publishing that I think a lot of people overlook or kind of forget about, and that's interior formatting, which I think is hugely important to any book success. Or at least it contributes a lot to the readability of a book. So today I've picked out a few of my favorite books, and I'm talking interior formatting and what makes it so great. First up is The Diviners by Libba Bray, which I read this past spring or early summer, and oh my god, I cannot tell you how much I love this book. I think I mentioned it in my introduction video, but I love more than just the character and the stories and the writing of Libba Bray. I love the interior formatting. The Diviners takes place in 1920s New York, so naturally the interior formatting reflects an Art Deco feel. Everything about this book is magic, and the interior formatting is no different, so let's take a look. I gotta find the page. You can see that the chapter titles for each chapter, it just has this really great Art Deco feel to it, a nice light background. I think if it was a little darker it would be too distracting, but because it's that light gray faded look to it, it just enhances it and looks really artistic and nice, and oh my gosh, I love it. Up next is Rick Yancey's book, The Fifth Wave. I got this book after I was walking around Barnes & Noble. I was really drawn in by the cover, but I was not expecting to get so obsessed with the formatting of this book, which literally I have not stopped talking about. The book is divided into a bunch of different parts, which are denoted by these gorgeous black pages with stars shining through that kind of really set you in that dystopian mood of no electricity and only nature. And then going beyond that, his formatting is so simple. Each chapter title isn't really decorative, but he does something really ingenious, or at least his interior formatter did something really ingenious. They started each chapter on the same page the previous chapter ended. So at the end of chapter 4, it immediately starts in on chapter 5 on the same page, which kind of creates this sense of urgency or rapidly moving forward. I just love the simplicity of the design and the idea to start the next chapter on the same page. For my birthday this past year, WordNerd Kelly Sheridan bought me the book Daughter of Smoke and Bones, which I had been dying to read and was not disappointed with the fantastic story. What I loved about this book was also the simplicity of its formatting. Each chapter header had this really simple design next to it that was just enough to kind of pique my interest in the formatting itself and actually take notice. I think the great thing about formatting, especially in books like this, is that I take notice of it, but it's not distracting. I have been a fan of Tahereh Mafi's writing style since I first picked up Shatter Me from my library and then bought myself a copy of this gorgeous book, both in its writing, its cover, and its interior formatting. This interior formatting really reflects Juliet's story of conflict well. As you can see on the back cover here, she has this way of saying something, scratching it out, and saying something else. For example, if you look at chapter 1, which I would like to point out, the title font is the same as the title font of the actual book itself, which I like the continuity there, but she has writing that she scratches out. She says something, scratches it out, says what is either actually said or maybe what she thinks they say. I'm not sure. I kind of like that it's a little bit up for interpretation. I just really like the effect that the crossed out words has to do with it, and I think it lends to the story really well, and it's nice when you see interior formatting helping tell the story itself. You know what's a great book? The Book Thief, and it's turning into a movie. But past the writing itself, the formatting is so awesome. I love books with short chapters because I tend to read them quicker because I'm like, oh, how many pages until the next chapter? Oh, only 3? I can read that, and then I'm done the book in a few hours. The Book Thief is actually told through Death's point of view, which is not only just a great way to tell a story, a really unique story, but it's reflected in the formatting again itself. There are parts of the book where Death takes an aside from the narrative, adds in what he's thinking, sees, and then returns to the story. And there are a few times he does that, kind of infuses his personality into the narrative itself. My favorite example of this is the final thought that Death leaves us with, that perhaps he is the one who is haunted by humans. And finally, I'm going to talk about my book and what I did for interior formatting for Ignite. I actually did the cover design and the interior formatting myself for my book, mostly because I didn't have the money to pay someone to do it, and I'm a bit of a control freak, and I love design and art, so I decided to take that task on myself. It's kind of how I fell in love with formatting. The story of my book is about Pen, a demon. She's actually based on a mythological angel who was fallen from grace because she introduced man to the written word and taught him how to read and write. So I made Pen a character who was enamored with words and had a deep love for anything literary. So to reflect this in my interior formatting, I wanted to do really interesting chapter title headers to kind of catch the reader's eye and infuse that part of Pen's personality. Another thing I loved about stories when I was reading when I was younger is fairy tales were really kind of ornate, and I love the drop caps of some stories, so I decided to use that as well. Because Pen's story is kind of harsh, I wanted to make sure it was a really simplistic drop cap, so I used the same simple font of the chapter title and added a drop cap there. I also used the graphic ink splatters throughout for any scene breaks. And then the last thing I did is the epilogue is told from her brother's point of view, Aziel. The second book in the series, the full book, I've got a novella coming out in November, but the second full-length book, which is coming out in spring in Sight, will be told through both Pen and Aziel's point of view. To distinguish their personalities in that book, I'm going to be using font that reflects their characters both in style and their temperament. Interior formatting can either be spot on or very, very off. It can be spectacular and really draw your eye and add to the story, or it can kind of just go on unnoticed with nothing really special. It depends on the style of the writing and the author and the preferences of how they want to tell their story. My advice for formatting the interior of books is to keep it simple. If it's too distracting and too ornate, it usually draws back from the story and the reader might not be as focused. The writing might be hard to read itself, which would be crazy because you're trying to tell the story itself, and if a reader cannot actually read the story, then something's gone very wrong. So for the actual text of the book, it's important to keep the typography really, really simple. Just basic font, something in the style realm of Times New Roman. Where you want to worry about your typography and the interest it'll draw is in your cover and the chapter titles. You still want it to be readable and clear, but you can be a little bit more creative there. Also, adding a small design element to the chapters can be really appealing, but if you're more for simplicity, like in the Fifth Wave, you can go that way too, and it's just as exciting to read. So those are a few of my favorite examples of interior formatting and what I've done myself with my book in interior formatting. I will see you guys next week where I will handle Wordplay Wednesday. Have a great week and read all your books and notice the formatting. Bye!